Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, focused on the tragic loss of Air India Flight 171. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt, Germany. Good morning to you, Richard.
And good afternoon, Jeffrey.
It's a rather stormy afternoon here in Perth, a thunderstorm warning and whatnot. So, yeah. So, viewers, Obfuscation, episode 161. Clarity is the enemy of obfuscation. The preliminary report lacks clarity and is confusing to say the least and appears to hide the truth. The truth is the crash was due to dual engine shutdown and the aircraft never regained climb capability. The two apparent CVR lines reveal confusion in the cockpit. The FDR reveals a failed engine start. The preliminary report appears to clear the 787-8 and GE, saying, at this stage of the investigation, there are no recommended actions to the 787-8 or the Gen X-1B engine. The preliminary report is very ambiguous. The thrust levers were found near the aft idle position. However, the EAFR data revealed they remained forward. The preliminary data is clearly vague. Why say about 080842 UTC when exact timestamps exist? More important information is certainly missing. The engine 1, N1 and N2 began to decrease. What about the other engine? Use of passive voice to avoid naming responsible actors. In the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other, why did he cut off? The other pilot responds, he did not do so. The investigators know exactly who said what and when. Evidence appears very confusing. We are given a screenshot from the RAT deployment at takeoff, but where is the dust? Where is the smoke? The other CCTV footage shows clouds of dust and smoke swirling up behind the aircraft and slowly drifting away. So, Richard, what do you make of all that?
Yeah, well, the picture is confusing, isn't it? We are showing a screenshot of the two CCTVs, one from the preliminary report and the other from the airport security. And it's quite obvious the one from the preliminary report is a high resolution CCTV, and the one from the airport is a low resolution and poorer quality. And this is not a before and after. The two pictures are taken at the same time from different cameras. And in the preliminary report, the screenshot with the dust or smoke is gone. And I don't understand the difference. And I have to say, it concerns me.
Yeah, it does me too, Richard. It's almost two pictures taken on different days. Given the fact that the airport security CCTV is probably a lower quality, it still doesn't explain the stark difference between the two images there. They are really chalk and cheese, aren't they?
They are indeed.
Yeah. So Phil from Kanakistan, which is, for people who don't know, is Canada. All of India is desperately blaming everything and anything other than the pilot. And Barbara 5874, in reply to Phil from Canada, maybe, but I think it is a cover-up. Why would pilots do this and on takeoff and make a mayday call? I think pilots deliberately doing this is very unlikely. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Phil and Barbara. Um, in response to all of India is desperately blaming, I would say India is not a single voice. And I would also mention the preliminary report does not directly assign blame. There is evidence that the engines were relit. There is evidence of the pilot flying, the first officer maintaining an optimal aircraft attitude and a correct glide scope. So there is also evidence that the captain made a mayday call stating thrust not achieved, or mentioning at least the thrust or the reduction of thrust. And this, meanwhile, has been officially confirmed by the Indian authorities. So I think too soon to start blaming everything and everyone, and too soon to start blaming the pilots or the aircraft or the engines or the fuel. Um, and we need to keep an open mind.
So Torben 777, the two of you need to stop misleading people to cover up your prior misleading theories. It's not very nice. Anyone with proper technical insight understands the events by now. You misrepresent the rat facts. The rat takes less than 1 second to deploy, and it deploys when you turn off both engines. The message you read and praise is confusing deployment with power reduction, power production. Go search any number of videos on rat deployment. We know when the switches were flipped. We know when the rat deployed. We know when the engine stopped producing power. We know why the rat deployed. It deployed exactly at the point where the switches flipped. So why are you trying to work back from the point when the rat starts producing power? When both engine switches is at off, the computer knows no more power will be coming, and it deploys the rat. It takes milliseconds for the computer to figure this out and less than 1 second for the rat to come out. Switches were flipped 3 seconds after liftoff, and the rat would thus be out at 4 seconds past liftoff, which is exactly what the CCTV video shows. What is it that you don't understand? That's PS. For the conspiracy theorists out there, if the Indian government, Air India and or the Indian aviation authorities conspired to fake a report, do you really think they would fake a cause pointing the fingers at the Indian pilots and thereby at themselves instead of trying to blame it on Boeing? Think, people, think. That's a pretty heavy duty comment, Richard. I don't agree with it at all.
No, neither do I. And what concerns me, it appears that the author of the comment didn't even watch the episode yesterday. We state in the episode quite clearly the rat deployment takes around zero point 0.8 seconds. So when the author of the comment says less than 1 second, well, we agree on that point. So what is the point he's trying to make? And I also have to say, it's quite obvious he hasn't read the preliminary report and he hasn't read the Boeing FCOM. So I find myself quite dismissive of this comment.
Yes, and on that point, Richard, what we've done for the viewers is we've got a comprehensive list of all the episodes that we've done on this terrible tragedy, and we've covered it from end to end. And I would venture to say we've produced probably the very best analysis of this terrible tragedy that's out there. And there's a link below in the description if you wish to have a look at the complete list. And then from there, you can select an episode you want and put it into Google search and it'll come up and you can have a look at it. But you'll see a very comprehensive list. And I think that viewers will be very impressed by all the things we have covered on this. And the other thing too for viewers is, you know, these episodes are up to 30 minutes long and we do cover a lot in that 30 minutes. And, you know, if you only watch 10 minutes, well, then you might miss the part that answers your question. So just saying.
Yeah, it's up to the viewers what they watch, but
Yeah,
don't complain to us. We haven't said it when we have said it.
yes, indeed. Indeed. Yeah, and look, the viewers have got plenty of things to do, and they probably want to just have a quick look at something, and then they're happy with that. But then they start thinking, well, what about this? But it's been covered. But anyway, there's a list of episodes in the description below, so have a look. So, Mr. Channel 19, thank you for the rat deployment issued analysis. This should clarify the nature of the problem. Very good analysis and detailed information, Richard and Jeffrey. You are precise, and this is definitely has This definitely has a rat in the report and is suspicious. Obfuscation seems to be the key word in many areas of politics and insurance companies. Plausible deniability also seems to be another key word. People are not stupid. This should set an example for the heated rhetoric concerning air crashes, and our subscribers should consider the importance to the families of the dead and condolences needed for full circle closure. Thank you, gentlemen, for your keen attention to details and accuracy of the events. I prefer that comment, Richard.
Yeah,
And
me too.
K Clock 9057. Thanks so much for this analysis. When I looked at the timeline in the preliminary report, my first thought was that the rat deployment timing made no sense. So I'm pleased that this community is looking closely at that. The timeline honestly looks shoddy and lacking in detail and either suggests obfuscation or a poorly conducted investigation. I admit to being a total amateur following of these events. My dearly departed father was an avionics engineer, so I follow your channel because I know he would have loved it and to keep his spirit alive. That's a very nice thought.
Yeah, and our sympathies to your
Mm.
loss of your dearly loved father. I'm sure he was a great avionics engineer. So, if we're observing obfuscation because of shoddy work, then you might expect a number of mistakes to have been made. But what is stated in the report is largely accurate as far as I can see. It's just simply incomplete. And there is imprecise language, yeah, and there's passive phrasing, and there's lack of exact timestamps, and there's no quantitative tables or time-based graphing of engine parameters. So, all right, you could say it's shoddy and lacking in detail. The preliminary report does appear to be obscure and to obscure what happened rather than to clarify what happened. And the real sequence of causality in the crash is not obvious from the report.
Mm.
And where I draw the line is when the word about is used 15 times in the report, and the word approx or approximately is used 5 times in the report.
Yes, that's that line there, Richard. What you did, that last line of yours, that really is very, very telling. It's extraordinary. Aviation's all about accuracy down to millimeters and milliseconds and all those sorts of things. The word about and the word approximate should never appear in a crash report, even a preliminary crash report, even a one-page crash interim report. It just doesn't exist in aviation.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we praised the report initially because it was 15 pages and not
Mm.
one page like the China Eastern Airlines report.
Yeah.
And we heard today that the Jeju Intermediate report has been withdrawn at the last minute. So, you know, what's going on there?
Yeah. Yeah. So Clive Wenger, 4615, it's about obfuscation, deliberately so. Wow. Okay. What do you reckon?
Well, if it is deliberate obfuscation, then we will see in due course, because that will usually lead to a cover up. And if the final report, and I stress if, the final report is a cover up, then the next of kin and friends of the victims will suffer even more. And aviation safety will not learn any of the valuable lessons from this tragedy to make sure it doesn't happen again. So for me, it's not about obfuscation or cover up, it's about the truth. And it's about making sure such an event, such a tragedy, never happens again.
I think the investigators at the AAIB better consider these numbers, Richard, and that is There are 27,000 separate channels covering this crash, and there are now over 60,000 videos from those 27,000 channels. By contrast, MH370, the most mysterious crash of all time, 10,000 videos only. So there's a very
Mm.
stark difference in the amount of the intensity, and this is only after just over 5 weeks since this plane was lost. So the intensity of the or the scrutiny, I should say, on this crash is without precedent.
Yeah.
So, Michelle Caruth, hi, both of you. I think the Indian investigators want people to read the report as vague so no one can say for sure that it was the pilot who, in my opinion, did want to commit suicide, which Air India and investigators do not want to be explicitly said, probably for many reasons, hoping instead that the public will in time forget about this terrible accident. Just my 2 pence worth. Thank you both for your effort to report the facts. Love from the Pyrenees in France. That's a great place to be.
Yeah, I like the Pyrenees in
So do
France
I.
and
Yeah.
love back from Frankfurt.
Yep.
Um, I do not believe that the public will forget this accident in time. Jeffrey's just outlined the huge interest and beyond any previous aircraft accident. And I think the investigators um, can't be accused of hiding the truth and covering up when there's such a great public interest. And if they were to try to do that, cover up or hide the truth, then I think the interest would be even greater
Mm,
from the
mm.
public. So, and when I think about MH370 happening 11 years ago, and the public interest in that mystery is still quite substantial, we
Yeah.
could still be talking about Air India in 11 years' time.
Well, it's interesting, going on those numbers, and one of the different dynamics, of course, is MH370 was lost back in 2014 before YouTube, not before YouTube, but before YouTube had got its enormous following that it has today. But two dynamics with MH370, there's been 150 books written about MH370, and when we were doing our podcast focusing on 370, and which was sort of pushed aside for the Air India crash, um, we were getting 170,000 views on some of the episodes. So there's intense interest in that one as well. Just 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 underscores the incredible interest in these sorts of terrible accidents, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm quite sure there are 150 books being written right now on the Air India crash.
Yes. What is my IP 9241? A retired Vietnam Airlines pilot James Wong, who flew 787s during his career in his live stream, stated that we ought to be able to discern from the CVR as to the timing and manner of fuel switches being thrown. If these switches were thrown normally, the clicks would have been recorded by the CVR. It is possible to quietly throw the switch, but that would require deliberate and slow motion to achieve the switch. Given both switches were thrown to the off position within a second, that would indicate action in quick succession that should be recorded by the CVR. His view is the pilot's suicide seems very unlikely, as there were numerous ways to achieve a certain crash during a takeoff without resorting to the obscure method of cutting off fuel to the engine. Given how well the aircraft maintained its attitude right before the crash, the pilots were definitely trying to save the plane. A suicidal pilot could have easily interfered with the attitude using various controls to ensure a crash. And responding to that, Richard McDonald 1310 said, how often as a 787 pilot has James Wong actually listened ever to a CVR download? Please answer me this if you know the answer. And Fair Lady S130 responding, you are assuming the fuel switches were manually operated when the report is ambiguous in that regard. and Patrick Lockerbie 4308. Each switch is wired in parallel with 3 relays per engine. The odds per engine are thus 1 in 4 that the pilot shut off fuel, as against 3 in 4 that the automated system did it. When considering dual engine cutoff, there is only one way for a pilot to do this, but 9 ways for the system to do it. And finally, Jet Plane Flyer, in reply to Fair Lady, the report was clear that the switches transition to the cut position. The switches can only transition manually. There is no automated system to transition the switches. If the switches didn't physically transition, then the report would have not stated that they did. There's a bit of a debate going on there, Richard.
Yeah, there is, isn't there? And it's fascinating to follow the debate backwards and forwards. And, on one hand, we get a pilot who is obviously experienced on the 787, but then people saying, well, the pilot's probably never listened to a CVR and doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm
Mm,
quite sure the pilot does know what he's talking about, and I agree with the pilot. The attitude of the aircraft was carefully preserved. The scope was fine, and quite clearly they were trying to save the aircraft. And then I agree also with the statement that the preliminary report is ambiguous in many areas. And I also have to agree with the statement the viewers appear to be making assumptions.
mm,
I also agree with the factual statement each switch is wired with 3 relays. And the report is, however, clear that the switches were transitioned, physically, mechanically moved from the run to the cutoff position and later on back to the run position. And the rat deployment appears to be initiated before the fuel switches were moved. So,
mm.
in my view, the cause of the rat deployment was not the fuel switches, but there's another cause. And we need to continue going through each possibility until we find out what the cause was for the rat deployment. And it might give us an indication of what the cause was for this crash.
Yeah. It's interesting, Richard, when we were prior to the report being issued, we were both, and with Moen as well, saying, we didn't think we thought we might get a page or two. When we got 15 pages, we thought, wow, this is fantastic. 15 pages looks very comprehensive on first, run through. But as we've drilled through it week by week, episode by episode, we find it more confusing, more ambiguous, more vague, more about, and more approximate than possibly any preliminary report I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. And what happens? It raises more questions than it answers.
Yeah. As we're seeing from the viewers, we're getting almost 1,000, even in fact, sometimes more, 1,000, 1,500 questions per episode. And a lot of the questions are very, very good questions. And there's obviously a lot of people out there who are in the industry or really good amateur sleuths who are finding holes in it, and drawing our attention to, guess what? This doesn't seem to make sense, sort of stuff. So some great dialogue going on.
Yeah, there is indeed. And the record of all of them, I received a 13-page email
Oh,
with the analysis from one viewer. He didn't want to put it up as a comment because it probably blow YouTube's word length. Not that I know that they have a max word
no.
length, but 13 pages. It takes the time to absorb it all.
And of course, he's taken the time to write it all.
And we will take the time to reply to it all.
We'll do that. And talking of that, we'll be back tomorrow with your questions from this episode and previous episodes. And we haven't worked out what the theme is yet. We'll look at the episode, look at the questions, and then we'll develop a theme. But thank you very much, Richard, for your analysis of these questions that have been raised, and much appreciated. Viewers, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to us. Please like us. Please keep those comments coming. We do really appreciate the support, and please keep those questions coming, and we do appreciate them very much indeed. So, Richard, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you, viewers. And please do tune in tomorrow for another edition of Daily Airline News. And don't forget, check the description below for the link to a list of all the episodes that we have done. It's very comprehensive. Thank you.